Hi guys, alright, this is going to be a quick video. I've been getting some requests from some loyal followers that they'd really love to see the new Nirvana because must be some reason that I'm not showing it to everyone. And to be honest, it's because I've been really busy testing some new tech, testing some new propellers, and there was a little bit of, I would say, sensitivity around the equipment on the machine and whether that was going to last. Because quite frankly, if you see something on a machine and you think that it might be nice for yourself, then you might just want to buy it. But then in the end, after 10, 20, 30 hours it breaks or your machine breaks, and it was because of the advice that comes from someone like me. And I really do take my advice really important. I'm a no BS kind of guy. I think most people that know me for the fact that I'm no BS, and that I'd rather say the truth than be popular. So I wouldn't promote something that isn't exactly what I say it is, because afterwards your credibility comes into question. And I do think that there's quite a few characters that are really popular in this sport whose credibility is actually crap, because of previous promotions of products that end up being either dangerous or just plain crap. That being said, everybody knows me as a very loyal Dudek and Nirvana guy, and that's partially because of the fact that I've got input into some of the product design. For example, I'm the high altitude test pilot for Nirvana. I do most of the high flights, even for someone like the Dudek company. When I was doing high altitude race courses, Dudek couldn't tell me what the warp or the Dudek hadron was going to do at fields above 5,000 feet. They had no idea what it was going to do. And pretty much the first race that I did was an indicator of whether the glider was going to perform, or how it was going to perform on takeoff and landings at high altitude. And there's some really special products that's coming in the future, projects that's coming in the future, because of that same kind of development curve that we follow. But having said that, I would call any machine that really doesn't last in a race and it's got a pattern of doing that, I would highlight that for people, because if you buy a machine just because there's a really grand poster of it or really grand marketing of it, and you weren't really told the truth about it, then you're going to end up wanting to leave the sport, perhaps because you've spent the money and the sport hasn't turned out exactly as enjoyable as it could have been. So I've highlighted in the past some machines that I do feel is not up to it, and I've also changed my opinion on some machines because of the manufacturer's input and their quest to make changes to their design in order to give a better customer experience, to fix their problems, so to say. So I'm going to highlight someone like that, a product like that, Parajet. I wasn't a fan of the Moster 185 because I saw the results of those machines in races, and there was a really big reason why I wasn't a fan. It's because most of those machines broke in long cross-country races, and you could blame the pilots, but ultimately a machine needs to be durable enough in order to last. And I've changed my opinion on the new My 20 machine, Moster 185, because I've seen some development progress on their side. I've also seen some development progress from Parajet and their own frame designs, etc. So I've changed my opinion about their product. And I do feel that they've come a long way and they've used the input of their race pilots to design a better product. So that is just to show you that it's not just about being loyal to Nirvana, but being loyal to the fact that actually just being loyal to quality and durability. And I've kind of stuck with the Nirvana brand because they are so dedicated to taking and sucking up every little piece of information they can get from other pilots about design, about things that they can improve on. And this is a daily thing. This is not something that is from quarter to quarter. Listen, are we going to change the exhaust? Are we going to change this? Are we going to change that? No, this is a daily thing. I'm in contact with Nirvana every day. And so when I made the call to them, I think it was like 3 or 4 days ago, and I said, I'm done, I'm finished. I'm happy with the cross-country design. I'm not going to be giving any more input as far as the F-Light is going and cross-country development. And I think they were kind of like, what did you say? What? And I think there were some balloons and champagne popping later that afternoon, because I think they're tired of me. I'm just one of those Jack Russell dogs that just keep on rah, 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 and just wanting to make change all the time and keep pushing the envelope. And so I feel that the product is finished now as far as efficiency, durability, and everything else goes. And I'm going to explain how that works, and as quick as possible, because I'm sure you want to see the machine. All right. First off is weight. When I started racing with and flying cross country, and that was my start off point, I never went into acrobatics or anything of that sort. Weight was an issue because the Nirvana 200 weighed 27 kilos empty, and that was without a reserve chute. The Nirvana 230 Instinct weighed 33 kilos empty. Those weights are unrealistic when you go out of the realm of sport flying. They're really durable when you fly cross country and you're flying on your own. It's just like a Saturday afternoon flying. But the fact is that when you start loading equipment on cameras or unsupported gear for Icarus races, etc., that weight becomes unsustainable. And I'll tell you why it becomes unsustainable. It's because the power to weight ratio changes. You only have a certain amount of power that you can't increase, and your weight keeps on increasing because you're loading more and more gear. And the heavier you become, the more fuel you use, the more oil you use, the more things you have to pack in order to become really good at the cross country race, or in order to achieve your result. So what I've learned through the racing is that no matter how much I really try to improve my result, I really couldn't get past the fact that I was weighing too much and it needed to change. And that was hallelujah when Nirvana came with the F-Lite, because now suddenly it went from 33 kilos down to 20 kilos. There's a CC change there, goes from 230 to 200, but the 200 new on the F-Lite is a new redesigned engine, new exhaust, new everything. And it actually produces a better power to weight ratio all around. And I actually would say that the thrust is more on the 200 because of the engine becoming more powerful. They've made it more powerful. It puts out more RPM. The propellers, everything has changed. And so the thrust is more than you'll get out of a 230 Nirvana Instinct. So that's my honest opinion. Some might change. Some might prove something different on the bench. You're more than welcome to, but that is my opinion. That is the feel that I'm getting from, or the feedback I'm getting from my equipment, and I pretty much fly everything that's Nirvana. Okay, so weight was one of the big factors there. The second one is that power to weight ratio. I spoke about it. So at 20 kilos with the F-Lite, the power to weight ratio is actually very balanced because you've got a hell of a lot of power, but a very lightweight, durable frame design that is quite good for, you can load on more weight and it balances out quite nicely. So you're off the ground a lot quicker with your takeoff, and you can reduce the size glider that you're going to fly with, which also reduces other numbers like your drag, etc. So you're using less fuel, you become more efficient. All of those things come into play, and especially if you've got a really good power to weight ratio, it means getting off the ground quickly and also a lot easier in flight and gaining altitude, your climb rates, everything improves. Thrust, spoke about it briefly. With the new F-Lite, we've been able, with the 2-blade configuration, be able to increase the power. And there's also a new 3-blade that's gone through the testing. I like it. It's just a bit noisy, but it also produces the same numbers as a 2-blade. So as far as thrust goes, the thrust is really powerful. It's efficient at both low altitudes, high altitudes, and the efficiency is really great when it comes to that as well. But it's powerful, and it's especially powerful because it's light. Okay, efficiency. Now, you could have an efficient motor in a 3-blade configuration. I've heard pilots speak about this, some other pilots on YouTube as well, that talk about how, if they fly trims closed, the machines are very efficient, and how the inefficiency or how their efficiency changes as they open up the trims, the speed that they start gaining. Actually, not so much about the trim setting, but more about the speed. At what speed, what is their efficiency? So bottom line is, it goes back to gliders as well. Your efficiency is also determined with what kind of glider you're flying. But essentially, if you're lightweight, you can reduce the size glider. On a new technology glider, you should be able to get quite a good speed. But there are some really jackasses on YouTube that are giving advice like, I'm gaining 50 miles an hour and something like that. If someone tells you to buy a glider in the weight range that differs from what the manufacturer says, then you need to stop listening to that person. There is a specific reason why the manufacturers go out of their way to explain to you what is the maximum weight and what is the minimum weight. You can determine what your maximum weight should be. If you fly within the envelope of the design, then you get the performance that's advertised or comes advertised with that product. So if you are flying ridiculously fast and you're burning a hell of a lot of fuel, it's because you're taking a super small glider and you're using power and skill to get off the ground and to gain a lot more speed. That's usually what acrobatic and slalom racing pilots do in order to be really good at what they do. So when it comes to cross country, and this is the final word on it, because this is the manufacturer's word on it. And nobody else, you cannot dispute this. You cannot change anything from what the manufacturer says in their manuals. If you buy a glider, you buy it with the idea that you are going, your maximum load that you're going to load, that's your maximum fuel, your maximum payload, you as a pilot, what clothes you're wearing, the weight of the glider, all of that calculates in. You have to be below the top maximum weight of the glider envelope. So for example, on the Warp 20, it's 145 kilos. So I need to be below that. If you buy the glider, you try to be about 10 to 15 to even 20 kilos below the maximum weight, because when you add fuel and you add all those things, then usually you end off around 10 kilos below the glider's top weight. If you fly in that envelope, you'll see that you do not have as much speed as you would fly a glider that you are overweight on. All right, so never go over the maximum weight of a glider. If you do that, you are flying at your own risk and your own realm and your own numbers. Those numbers aren't comparable in the real world. All right, that is exactly the same thing why some fixed-wing airplane pilots, if they didn't do the weight calculation correctly and the plane doesn't come off in time, that they run over and they crash the planes, is because they're dumbass pilots. You always fly within the envelope and the description that the manufacturer gave you in the manual. And you never change that because somebody else tries to convince you otherwise. All right, that's the final word on it. Okay, so efficiency. Getting back to that, the glider does determine efficiency. So when you do fly below the maximum weight of the glider, you need to be efficient both at low altitudes and at high altitudes. The higher you go up, the less oxygen there is to burn in the combustion process, but you're still putting out the same amount of fuel that goes through the carburetor, because you can't set that in flight usually. So because of that, you start getting less RPM on the gauge, and basically you're throttling the engine. It's just too much. It's becoming too rich. And eventually you're going to end off 15,000 feet or something like that, and the motor's going to be inefficient. It's going to die on you, or whatever the case might be. But basically, if you could decrease that fuel mixture, if you could improve that fuel mixture in flight, then you would have had a better system. All right, so efficiency, the propeller plays a lot. Comes a lot into account there. If I fly the racing line propeller for Nirvana, it's efficient at ground level. At 3-blade, I'm flying 1.9 liters an hour. If I was to fly trims closed with a 3-blade propeller on the F-Flight F200. So it's incredibly light, but it does not produce enough thrust. So the combination needs to be there where the thrust is high, and the efficiency is good. So I've spoken in previous videos about that curve that you've got to meet up with. You need to have maximum thrust with the best possible efficiency for a cross-country flight, to be able to get out of tight spots that you've chosen off landed or landed at outlandings, etc. And it's tough. So the quest was really for me to get a propeller set that works well with the F200, that'll give me efficiency at high altitude and at low altitudes, and at the maximum possible cruise speed, which I've explained in previous videos, actually 35 knots on the Nirvana. That's trims open, and I haven't used speed bar. Don't go onto speed bar with that in order to gain more speed than that. Even though I can go to 42 knots, I wouldn't want to do that because the efficiency is just nuts. It just goes to 6 liters, or actually 5.5 liters to 6 liters. But actual fact, one of the races was 6.5, but I was a headwind as well. All right, so torque is a big issue. Now, some instructors, especially in the USA, would say to you that torque isn't really an issue. Don't worry about torque. Who gives a shit about torque? they're full of crap. There's been a lot of accidents, a lot of evidence of accidents where if the machine twists on the pilot's back at takeoff because it's got so much power and the pilot's pretty lightweight, the machine turns on the cage turns on his back because of the thrust motion. It gives a false turning motion moment, especially when it comes to low hang point machines where the wing attaches directly to the frame. Okay, those swing arms, they're connected to the frame. So as that thing changes, it actually pulls on the risers. Just think this through and you'll see what I mean. And actually what happens is, as this thing turns, the glider's actually turning and the pilot wants to start turning to compensate for the false turning moment. And there's been evidence of some accidents because of that. So eliminating torque is really important. I actually don't sell the F200 in South Africa without anti-torque twist air paddles. I've seen, a professional pilot can get away with it, but I don't trust torque to be manageable for a student that goes up for the first time. How much of a difference when it comes to power? If you add something like the twist air paddles that goes onto the F200, you lose 300 RPM. That's a lot of RPM. I can get a lot more out of my machine if I didn't fly twist air, but it's about the whole package that's important. Durability. All right. I'm going to give you some stats. On the 3 Icarus races, when it comes to unsupported races, the first Icarus, only 3 pilots finished. The second Icarus, which is the main 2018 Africa race, it was incredibly tough. I mean, it's way tougher than any other Icarus race ever done before because there's no infrastructure to land at, there's no support, there's nothing, it's just bush. And it was tough, hot conditions. Only 3 pilots finished again. All right. And then I'm not talking about adventure race. Guys that have vehicle support, they swap parts out, they keep on going. I'm talking about unsupported. It means the machines had to last all the way to the end. The last Icarus X race, there has been a lot of improvements from manufacturers, but obviously some not so much as others. And there's 5 pilots that finished the race, which I believe is a really good result. Now I'm talking about there's always about 20 to 25 pilots in a race. So when you have a result like that, you've got to ask yourself the question, all right, what went wrong? And if you actually look at what went wrong with every single person or pilot in that race, yes, there is pilot fault because settings were done incorrectly here and there, but there's also breakages in flight, engines coming apart, exhaust breaking, propellers breaking, pistons burning all the time. When I say piston, I mean seizures the piston. So there's all of these things, and then you got to dig into that to see what was the result of that. And the manufacturers have to do that in order to improve their product. They have to determine, and some manufacturers just really don't give a damn. They're just saying, all right, the Icarus guys are just up to no good. What they do is really not important to us. It's not important to our market because, well, who else is crazy enough to fly 1,900 miles unsupported? But the fact is that we're pushing these machines harder than anyone else on the planet, hands down. So because of that, we are showcasing whether these machines are durable or not. And these machines also have to take a lot of punch. Now, when you look at the Nirvana Instinct, the Nirvana Ranger, the Nirvana Airflight, which are the toughest? And one would say, be inclined to say that the Ranger is the toughest of all of them. And it has a very tough frame. But I've had an accident on this field, on my field, where I took off and I was trying to learn to fly high hang points, and I was about getting real cheeky and just tough to get back to wriggle into the seat, and it's different for me. I'm not a low hang point guy, but Nirvana forced me to do that. For about 8 months, I had to learn how to fly low hang points, and that was the only thing I'm allowed to fly is that. And what happened was I tried to get into the seat and I grabbed my risers to wiggle myself and pull myself into the seat, and I accidentally pushed the one buckle, trimmer buckle, and the one side jumped open and the other side was still closed. The wing loading on that glider was enormous. So with the Airflight, and it cart rolled me towards the ground because it was just after takeoff. It was like 10 meters on the ground. That's what I'm saying. I'm getting cheeky because you're trying to get into your seat and you're just off the ground. It cart rolled me towards the ground. I wasn't able to think clearly or fast enough just to grab the brake handle. I tried to close the trimmer first, which I did, but I was already heading towards a an embankment. And I had a choice of going downwind back into the field, but cart roll into the field, or go into a fixed obstacle right in front of me, which would be a head-on crash. And I flew right into the ground. I cart rolled right into the ground, just picked my legs up and let the machine take the punch. I broke 2 struts. And there is a hole in the field to this day. I hit that ground so hard, the guys all came out running, and they were just, "Hey man, are you dead? What's up?" And I had not a single scratch on me. I broke 1 propeller. Even though I switched off the engine, it still broke due to the impact, but I broke 2 struts. The frame on the Nirvana F-Lite is insanely strong. That carbon fiber is, I cannot explain to you how strong that is. It won't bend, it won't flex, there's nothing you can do to it. I think you got to take a chainsaw to it to actually break that. The fact is, if that was any other machine, it would have been a write-off. I've seen guys write off the Instinct body. I've seen guys damage the Ranger bodies with hard impacts, but hitting the ground at something like 60 kilometers an hour with a 20-degree angle, that is a sure case for a write-off. And the fact that I just swap out 2 struts and a propeller is just insane. Okay, so I've come to a point where I've decided that this is the most durable machine I can possibly get. The exhaust won't break. I've flown the crap out of it. The frame doesn't twist. It doesn't bend. It doesn't yield to anything, to little accidents or whatever. And I think this is it. I can't really give Nirvana any more advice on where to improve on. They made a lot of improvements from the first F-Lite to the last F-Lite, so they've really gone out of their way to make sure that the product is better. All right, so that is my categories. It's done. Let me show you the machine. Let's go. All right, so there we are. Right for the instant light change. Alright, it's a camo color. This is just I also sell machines to the Special Forces, so this is just a very cool color scheme that goes along with it, instead of a blue and orange and things like that. High hang point configuration. The reason why high hang points is important for me, I started off with low hang points on the F-Lite. Didn't like it as much because it was more prone to little accidents and settings, and you always got to be 100% right. More torque roll, even if you had the twist, the anti-torque systems, there was always still a little bit of torque present. I didn't like that. I kept on making little mistakes on landings and takeoffs and things like that. It wasn't, maybe I'm not good enough, and I'm honest to admit to something. I took 8 months and I still wasn't becoming good enough on low hang points. That should tell you something, because I'm a pretty good pilot at this point. So like what I said to Nirvana is that I kept on pushing. I was a freaking Jack Russell, if not a Rottweiler, on completing the high hang points. And I said to him, if you want to make this thing right for cross country, please develop something, just put a harness on, do something to make it high hang points. And actually what they did was they changed the frame, and you'll see this is actually changed from the previous. You see there's a little metal piece, so the harness goes in, but it's not just hooked up here to the top. It actually goes through all the way, and you can set by just that little bolt over there, that little bolt over there. You take this panel out, you can put your hands around the whole engine. You can work on this engine, and you can set that frame. You can set the harness. You've got access to the harness settings from inside this panel, and you've got harness settings under the seats. And what I'm trying to get to is the fact that these swing arms, which were initially designed for low hang points, and you can fly it both low hang points or high hang point configuration. But the point that I'm trying to make is that once it's in high hang point configuration, it gives this weird suspension effect in the air, which makes it even more comfortable to fly in really thermic conditions. Now, I fly with other pilots, race pilots, that fly the same gliders, and they fly perhaps different machines, and some have started off as low hang points, and others have gone over to high hang points. And I'd listen to the bitching and moaning, or I'd listen to other comments, and I can tell you, my personal experience, This configuration is outstanding. It's like it's giving some form of give and take. These swing arms are working, but because the center of gravity is lower, you are hanging below the anchor points, onto the glider, and it's onto the harness, but it's also onto the frame as well. It gives a really fantastic comfort flow in the thermic conditions, and I've seen this in the Icarus. I've actually flown one Icarus with high hang point configuration. I got to tell you that the other guys were not having such a good time as I was. At some points I was answering phone calls and talking crap to buddies and whatever else, and the glider would be in front of me here and in the back. It's just all over the place. It's thermic as hell, and the wind was howling. And I can hear guys saying, "Yeah, it's crazy out here." But I was comfortable. I wasn't uncomfortable. It was keeping track. That's also due to the really great Dudek warp. But the suspension, I've just tested it and flown a lot of cross-country hours, and it feels more comfortable than any other high hang point machine that I've flown before, and definitely a lot more comfortable than the low hang point Nirvana by 70-80% at least. All right, okay, so what else is different on this machine? You'll see that there is a diagnostic that comes up here. There's a little diagnostic that comes that gives you RPM and everything else readouts. So that's RPM. It gives you head temperature. It gives you exhaust gas temperature, and those temperatures are really important when you do your flying, because you want to know whether you've had your settings done correctly onto the carburetor. You're flying in different airfields, and if you are too lean on the carburetor, the machine, the exhaust gas temperatures and the head, they're going to run too hot, and the manufacturer would be able to tell you exact what temperatures you should not go over, and if you do, you're running the risk of an engine seize. So having those gauges in front of me is really a pleasure, and Airflight has them. Okay, I'm going to turn it around like this. My shadow's in the way, but here is the titanium exhaust. The titanium exhaust, I can't tell you what a sweet design this is. It is just really so beautiful in all ways. You got the scoop. That's nothing new, but let me tell you about the titanium exhaust. I don't think this is something that you need to plan on when you are going to buy Nirvana, unless you're a really deep pocket customer. And that's because Nirvana doesn't really work in titanium. Czech Republic doesn't work in titanium. They work in carbon fiber. Their skills and their supply and everything is around carbon fiber. So they do carbon fiber work for a lot cheaper than other countries would. But when it comes to titanium, I believe they built my titanium exhaust and then the supply didn't have any more for a second one. So it gives you an idea that it's not really something that they do. But when they made those first prototypes, they went all the way with it. They refused to sell these, or offer it as a product until it did like 150 hours worth of flying at Nirvana. So it had a crazy amount of testing that went into it. And it's about, because of some results in some races where titanium exhaust cracked to shock cooling, you fly and it's starting to rain or something and that exhaust cracks and you got a problem. So they needed to make sure that their design was both powerful, lightweight, and did not produce in a substandard quality product. This one been tested as hard as possible, and as far as my opinion goes, it is spectacular. I love the sound. I love the fact that I've reduced even more weight. Something between 700 grams and a kilo I lost just because I put that exhaust on, and it's pretty durable. Okay, I'm going to keep on shifting this machine around to show you. Now, I know there's going to be some really clever guys that have figured out that there's E-props on this machine, and I'm sorry to Nirvana that I haven't taken them off, but I'm flying this propeller now. I'm just going to give a disclaimer when it comes to E-props and why I'm flying E-props. It's not just about E-props. There's a whole bunch of different props that I'm testing. And the reason why it's gone to E-props for me is because, and it's about a development process, and we're seeing how other producers are doing their propellers and how it functions with the engine. If you try and ask for an E-prop for a Nirvana on the Airflight or any of these machines, you will be disappointed. any single model that you order from eProps is going to disappoint you. It's cost me an enormous amount of money to order props from them because they just don't function right on the Nirvana, and it's because of the engine performances. Their products are designed for the Moster and for a lot of other manufacturers that have a complete different specification than the Nirvana engine and the Nirvana system. This is a computer-controlled engine. See, a lot of guys don't know that. They think this is a plain Simonini, but this thing has a computer. And the functions and the timing and everything else in this machine, you will not be able to start this machine if that computer doesn't function. The exhaust, all of those power band issues, there's a lot of technology that goes into this, and the eProps just don't function with the Nirvana. This specific prototype that I'm flying on mine, don't try and obtain it from eProps, because this is a development product. It's a really good product. Somehow it's worked, but there's no way that you can order it because it's not on the product list. Okay, so just forget about it. Just ask me about it, just let it go. Nirvana's 2-blade product is actually, because it's a center bolt system, it is the best product out there, and there is a 3-blade coming. I'm not showing the 3-blade now, but the 3-blade is even more efficient, so it's a really good product. But I'm running through a 100-hour test on this eProp, so that's why you're seeing it on my machine. Okay, I want to show you guys this. This is most likely what everyone's going to be talking about for a while to come. What you're seeing here is a remote carburetor tuner. All right, so I can set my carburetor in flight with this mechanism, which has got its wires going up all the way around to the front, and basically I've got. Right, there's a little bit of an angle here, so it's a bit difficult for me to show this, but you can see that knob. I can just turn up and forward and backwards and to set my carburetor, and this is my throttle. Just want to put that back in place. Okay, right. Okay, so the remote carburetor tuner comes from originally from Veterazi. You can get it from Veterazi. Although I would tell you that if you are buying it from Veterazi, you need to know that you are going to snap a hell of a lot of needles on your carburetor. The first day, I actually shot this video to show you guys this machine on the first day, because it had, I believed I had the perfect machine ever. And I broke 2 needles in that day, 2 high-setting needles. In the first takeoff I did, I not crash landed, but did an emergency landing in the bush. Had to walk a mile back. I was cursing like a sailor, because that's not something that happens to me. I want something that's durable and dependable. Okay, so the system, the reason why those carburetor needles snapped is because even though it's anchored onto the machine, onto the carburetor, the vibration is still enough, and the needles are so sensitive that it will not last. Maybe it will last on a Moster 195. I'm not sure whether that's the fact or not. You're taking a chance if you do order that. What I had to do was, I have a brilliant engineer locally that works on machines, and he has got a lot of experience in boat engines. And what we did was we designed, or at least he designed, this little float coupling that goes onto a smaller needle. And because of that flexing, it works. It's now been tested. I've flown 20 hours with this without a hitch. It works perfectly fine. I can't do high altitude flying now, but the fact is that when high altitude flying will be done, I'm sure it'll work out fine as well. Now, what advantage that gives me is when I go above 10,000 feet, I can start leaning the engine out. Now, normal engine would would go down to about 6,300 RPM on the F-Light. Even lower, the higher up you go, you're going to lose more power, because I don't know what the prop efficiency is going to be, and that's also a test that has to be done. But I would be able to lean the carburetor, the high needle, which is a setting from 3,500 RPM and up. And I would be able to get it back to where I want it at 7,350 RPM, 7,400 RPM, depending on how hard the climb is. But if it's just a plain cruise, I'd be cruising at my optimal cruise RPM, which is around 5,800 RPM. And it'll be using less fuel, because I'm leaning it, I'm using less fuel, but I'm still at cruising speed. And therefore I have an advantage. So that would be in a race where I would select an altitude like 12,000 feet or 13,000 feet, and I'd go sit there and use that to my advantage. With better, the air is a lot thinner, so you have less drag. You're getting better speeds. The weather conditions might be better. It's all around. It's more choices at my disposal. Okay, what else is important about this machine is the reserve fuel tank. All right, up here, you've seen this before from my previous machine. Now my previous machine got nicked. It's a sad story, I don't even want to talk about it. Yeah, some guys broke into our airfield shop and stole 2 machines, and one of them was an F-Flight prototype, and then they took a knife or a saw or something to it and they started cutting it to pieces because they were just after the engine. I don't want to talk about it, it's a sensitive issue. So there's still an F-Flight body somewhere floating around, some scrap heap or somewhere. Anyways, this new one is factory built, and what I like about it is the fact that the fuel lines, the fuel line system, everything is nicely hidden away inside the skeleton. And the advantage of that is that I don't have switch off valves anymore for top tank to low tank, but the reserve tank gives me 15.5 liters when combined with the main tank. And gives me a range at cruise speed of 5 hours 30 minutes standard flying. So I don't have to use bladder bags, I don't have to use anything else if I just want to fly that amount of hours. That is where I should be with the propeller choice that I'm running. Anywhere between 4 hours 30 to 5 hours 30, that's where I'm looking at. So guys, that's it. Yeah, the twist air, a lot of guys are talking about the twist air. I like what Tom Cubat has done with his talk video. When it comes to the different torque systems, the F-Flight only has the paddles, beautiful little paddles, and when combined with the high hang points, you have almost zero torque. Why is anti-torque so important in flight? It's because when you at the top speed that you are cruising, your top cruise speed, and you don't have an anti-torque system, there's always a little bit of torque present. And you have this little counter trim that you have to do. And because of that little counter trim, you're actually losing a little bit of speed. So if you have a system both on the wing, from the wing manufacturers also eliminate torque in flight. So if you've got something that's from them and your machine eliminates torque, and you get to a point where you have zero compensation on one side, to zero compensation required for torque at top speed, then you are where you want to be. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy looking at the machine. It's fantastic. All right, just one more thing I wanted to show you guys is the cargo harness that I've created. So you'll pretty much just make out here these little selectable straps. Very easy. Got the tank, connects with Velcro around my waist, nice and high. My knees aren't catching, so for running and sprinting with the machine, not a problem. The tank opens up over here, but it's a hard case cargo pod. It's not just a bag, and it's easy to control, easy to manage. Goes up that. Your radio comes on top, your cell phone battery bank, RPM meter, everything sticks to the top of it. Now, a lot of guys will tell you that even seniors, really senior cross-country pilots will tell you that they've done it in one air cruise and they won't do another one because of how it's just uncomfortable and they weren't used to the amount of trouble that they were experiencing. So the point is to try and design the gear in such a way that you're having a really good experience. This has got an air mattress at the back, makes up for the fact that the F-Flight doesn't have a full harness over here on your back. The cargo tank is basically everything that you're going to need. Your oil, water, 1.5 liters of water goes into this as well. Tent, sleeping bag, cushion, everything that I've showcased, food, everything that I've showcased in some previous videos. This all goes into this. Weighs it down to, I think it's 5.5 to 6 kilos in total. So I'm really happy with that final result, and it's going to make flying for flying the F200 in a cross-country, unsupported cross-country project or race or something like that. It's going to make it absolutely fantastic and comfortable. So this is where we are with this system. I don't think that Nirvana is necessarily going to make this for you right from the beginning. Probably is still a choice that they have to make, but they do like the idea. and we'll see where we go with that. All right, guys, so final word from me is that I believe that with the F200, with the cargo solutions that we've made, with the carburetor tuners and everything else that we've designed so far, I do believe that we have a really good final product for guys that are doing unsupported flying. And I'm hoping that you guys will join the Nirvana family eventually. All right, guys, have a good one. Catch you on the next one.